Right now, as you watch this video, something extraordinary is happening inside your body. Your heart is pushing blood through nearly 60,000 miles of vessels, a network so vast, so precise, that if you stretch it all out, it could circle the earth more than twice. And at the very end of that network, the furthest point from your heart, are your feet, your lower legs, the parts of you that carry you through every single day. Here is what most people never get told. That enormous distance your blood has to travel makes your legs the first place to show signs when something goes wrong. Long before a doctor can see it, long before you feel anything dramatic. What you eat today is either keeping those pathways wide open or quietly narrowing them. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to take you inside that system. I'm going to show you exactly what 3 specific foods are doing to those blood vessels, those nerves, and those muscles. And then I'm going to show you 3 foods that science shows can genuinely reverse that damage, starting at the cellular level. I am Dr. Helson, and this is not general health advice. This is a biological tour of what is actually happening inside legs that are aging, and what you can do about it, starting today. Before we talk about any food, I want you to understand one thing, because once you see this, everything else will make sense. Your blood vessels are not rigid pipes. They are living tissue, flexible, responsive, and when they're healthy, they do something remarkable. They expand and contract based on what your body needs, pushing blood all the way down to the smallest capillaries in your toes. But here is what happens after 65. 3 things begin to shift, quietly, simultaneously, without any obvious warning. First, the walls of your blood vessels begin to stiffen. The technical term is arterial stiffness, and it means blood has to fight harder to travel the same distance it always has. Second, the tiny sensory nerves in the soles of your feet, the ones that send a constant signal to your brain about your balance, your posture, your position in space, begin to slow down. The signal gets quieter. Third, calcium that should be building your bones sometimes ends up depositing inside your arteries instead. And every calcium deposit is a narrowing. Every narrowing is less blood flow to the muscles and nerves below it. Now here is the critical insight. None of these 3 things happen overnight. They happen over months, over years, 1 meal at a time. And that means 1 meal at a time. They can also be slowed down, even partially reversed, if you know which foods to choose. The first food is beets, and I want to show you exactly why. At the molecular level, this is one of the most powerful things a person over 65 can put in their body. Beets contain a class of compounds called dietary nitrates. When you eat beets, your saliva begins converting those nitrates into nitrites. And then, inside your bloodstream, those nitrites are converted into something called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a signaling molecule, and its specific job, its one primary function, is to tell the smooth muscle inside your blood vessel walls to relax. When that muscle relaxes, the vessel expands. The opening gets wider. Blood flows through with less resistance and travels further, faster, with less effort from your heart. Now think about what that means for your legs. Those stiffening vessels I just described, beets are literally sending a chemical signal to relax them. Not a drug, a food, a root vegetable that has been growing in the earth for thousands of years. In a research study, older adults who consumed beet juice before walking walked measurably faster, used less oxygen doing it, and showed improved blood flow to the muscles in their lower legs, compared to the control group who consumed nothing. That is not a small finding. That is your circulatory system receiving exactly the signal it needs to do its job better. Beets also carry folate, a B vitamin that helps regulate homocysteine, an amino acid that, when elevated, quietly damages the inner lining of blood vessels. And they contain betalains, the deep red antioxidant pigments, which specifically target oxidative stress inside vascular tissue. You can roast them with a little olive oil and sea salt. Slice them into a salad, or blend them. A small beet, half a cup of frozen berries, a thumb of fresh ginger. The taste almost disappears. The biology does not. 2 to 3 servings a week is all it takes to begin measurably shifting your vascular biology. The second food requires me to explain something that most doctors do not take nearly enough time to explain, and it is arguably more important than blood pressure, more important than cholesterol when it comes to how your legs feel day to day. It is the relationship between blood sugar and your nervous system. Inside the soles of your feet and distributed throughout your lower legs, you have thousands of tiny sensory neurons, specialized nerve cells that are constantly sending information upward to your brain. Ground is flat. Angle is changing. Pressure is here. Shift weight left. That constant, real-time communication between your feet and your brain is what balance actually is at the neurological level. It is not just muscle strength. It is a signal, and that signal travels through tissue that is incredibly vulnerable to one specific thing: blood sugar spikes. When blood sugar rises sharply after a meal, it triggers a cascade of oxidative stress. The small blood vessels that supply your peripheral nerves begin to take damage. Slowly, cumulatively, silently. Each spike doing a fraction of harm. Until months or years later, those nerve signals get quieter, slower, less reliable. This is a measurable clinical condition called peripheral neuropathy, and it does not only happen to diabetics. Repeated blood sugar spikes from the wrong foods over years can silently erode peripheral nerve function in people who have never had a diabetes diagnosis. This is where sweet potatoes become important. Sweet potatoes have a lower glycemic index than regular white potatoes. That means they release glucose into your bloodstream slowly, a gentle, steady rise instead of a spike. The oxidative stress that damages nerve supply and capillaries is dramatically reduced. They are also rich in beta-carotene, which the body converts to vitamin A, directly protective for eye health, which is critically linked to fall risk. And they contain magnesium and potassium, both of which regulate the electrical signaling inside muscle cells, which is why sweet potatoes are also one of the most effective dietary interventions for nighttime leg cramps. Baked whole and eaten with the skin, cubed into soups and stews, mashed simply, without heavy cream or butter. 3 to 4 times per week gives your body a meaningful and measurable biological input. The third protective food surprises most people, not because of what it does for the body, but because of where it works. Most people think of kale as a general healthy food, a superfood, something for salads. What almost nobody understands is the specific biological mechanism that makes kale uniquely important for people over 65. It begins with calcium, and it begins inside your arteries. As the body ages, a process called vascular calcification accelerates. This is the depositing of calcium inside arterial walls, the same calcium that ideally belongs in your bones. When it accumulates in arteries, it hardens them, narrows them, and reduces the elasticity that allows blood flow to the lower body. The molecular gatekeeper that regulates where calcium goes, whether it stays in bones or migrates into arteries, is a class of proteins called matrix GLA proteins. These proteins need to be activated to do their job, and the compound that activates them is vitamin K1. Kale is one of the most concentrated dietary sources of vitamin K1 on Earth. This is not a minor nutritional footnote. There's a growing body of peer-reviewed research showing that individuals with higher dietary vitamin K1 intake have measurably less arterial calcification, measurably better vascular elasticity, and meaningfully lower rates of cardiovascular events. Your arteries are either staying flexible or getting harder. Kale is one of the few foods that directly addresses the mechanism responsible. But kale does something else that is less discussed and equally important. It contains lutein, a carotenoid antioxidant most people associate with eye health. And yes, lutein protects the macula in your eye, directly reducing risk of age-related macular degeneration, which is a significant fall risk factor. But lutein also crosses the blood-brain barrier. Once inside the brain, it concentrates in the areas responsible for processing speed and executive function, the systems your brain uses to detect instability and issue corrective motor commands. The split-second decision between catching yourself and falling. Research at the University of Illinois found that older adults with higher lutein levels in the brain showed faster neural response times in balanced critical situations. That reaction window, that fraction of a second, is partly determined by what you are eating. Raw kale can be tough on digestion. Massaging the leaves with a small amount of olive oil for 2 to 3 minutes physically breaks down the cell walls and dramatically improves palatability and digestibility. Or sauté lightly. Add to soups, blend into smoothies. 1 to 2 cups, 3 times per week, gives your body a meaningful and measurable biological input. Now we have mapped 3 foods that work with your biology as it ages. 3 foods that are addressing real, measurable mechanisms: blood vessel flexibility, nerve signal integrity, calcium regulation, and neural processing speed. But there is another side to this map, and this is where the conversation becomes uncomfortable for a lot of people, because the 3 foods I am about to describe are not obviously dangerous. They're not junk food. They're not processed chemical products. They're ordinary foods. Foods with a healthy reputation. Foods that are sitting in most kitchens right now. And after 65, the biology changes. The same foods that were neutral or even beneficial in your 40s and 50s begin interacting with your aging vascular system and your aging nervous system in ways that quietly accelerate exactly the damage we just spent time describing. The first food to reconsider is corn. Not corn as poison, not corn as the enemy, but corn as a specific biological problem for an aging vascular system. And here is the mechanism. Corn is extraordinarily high in omega-6 fatty acids, and the ratio between omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids in your diet is one of the most powerful regulators of systemic inflammation in the human body. Omega-3 fatty acids are converted by your body into resolvins and protectins, compounds that actively resolve inflammatory processes and repair inflamed tissue. Omega-6 fatty acids, by contrast, are converted into arachidonic acid and then into prostaglandins and leukotrienes, potent pro-inflammatory signaling molecules. In the right balance, this system is self-regulating. But the average American diet runs at a ratio closer to 20-1 omega-6 to omega-3. And for older adults eating a traditional diet that includes regular corn, corn on the cob, corn-based products, processed foods with corn oil, that ratio skews even further. What does chronic systemic inflammation do to your legs specifically? It targets endothelial cells, the cells lining the interior of your blood vessels. Damaged endothelial cells cannot produce nitric oxide efficiently. The very mechanism we described with beets, that vasodilation signal, gets disrupted. Blood flow to the lower legs decreases. Muscle oxygenation decreases. Balance deteriorates slowly, invisibly, over seasons. Corn also has a high glycemic index, creating the same blood sugar spikes we discussed that damage peripheral nerve supply in the feet. This is not an argument to never eat corn. It is an argument for frequency and context. If corn is appearing several times per week in your diet, your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is almost certainly working against your vascular biology. Reduce corn frequency and simultaneously increase omega-3 sources, fatty fish, walnuts, flaxseed, to begin restoring the ratio that keeps your inflammatory biology in balance. The second food is canned tomatoes. And this distinction matters because fresh tomatoes are actually genuinely beneficial, anti-inflammatory, rich in lycopene, protective. Canned tomatoes are a biologically different story. 2 reasons, and both connect directly to your vascular system. The high acidity of tomatoes causes them to leach bisphenol, commonly known as BPA, from most conventional canned linings into the food at higher rates than almost any other canned product. BPA is an endocrine-disrupting compound. In the aging body, where hormonal regulation is already less efficient, BPA exposure has been linked in peer-reviewed research to increase systemic inflammation and disruption of the signaling pathways that regulate vascular tone. Most commercial canned tomatoes also contain between 300 and 500 milligrams of sodium per half cup serving. Excess sodium in the aging body causes the kidneys to retain water to dilute the sodium concentration in the blood. That retained fluid distributes through soft tissue, including the tissue surrounding the small blood vessels and nerves in your lower legs. That subtle fluid pressure against nerve-supplying capillaries reduces the oxygen and nutrient delivery to the exact tissue we have been discussing throughout this entire video. The fix is precise and simple. Use fresh tomatoes whenever possible. When canned is necessary, look for two specific label claims: BPA-free lining and no salt added. Both exist. Both are widely available. That single swap, made consistently over months, removes two simultaneous sources of vascular stress from your diet. The third food is the most counterintuitive, because iceberg lettuce is not harmful in the same mechanistic sense as the first two. It does not spike blood sugar. It does not trigger inflammation. It does not disrupt hormonal signaling. What it does is something that researchers call nutritional displacement. And for older adults specifically, this quiet mechanism may be doing more cumulative damage than either of the two foods I just described. After 65, the body's ability to absorb and utilize specific micronutrients decreases. Gastric acid production drops. Intestinal absorption efficiency declines. Your aging body is, at the cellular level, working harder to extract what it needs from every meal you eat. In that context, every single bite you take carries extraordinary weight, because you can only eat so much in a day. Every bite of something nutritionally empty is a bite you are not taking of something your vascular system, your peripheral nervous system, and your bone structure desperately need. Iceberg lettuce is 96% water. It contains almost zero vitamin K1, the compound protecting your arteries from calcification. Almost zero folate, the B vitamin regulating vascular inflammation. Almost zero lutein, the carotenoid feeding your visual system and your brain's reaction speed. Almost zero magnesium, the mineral regulating muscle function and preventing the nighttime leg cramps that affect a third of adults over 65. Think about the person who makes a salad every single day, who is proud of that habit, and rightfully so, who considers that salad a meaningful act of self-care. If that salad is built on iceberg lettuce, they're creating a daily ritual of nutritional displacement. They're filling a bowl with something 96% identical to water, calling it nutrition, and unknowingly leaving the door open for every deficiency we have talked about today. Over 6 months, the vitamin K1 deficit allows arterial calcium to accumulate unchecked. Over a year, the folate deficit allows homocysteine to quietly damage vessel walls. Over 2 years, the magnesium deficit deepens, the leg cramps worsen, the sleep suffers, and the muscle recovery slows. None of it dramatic. All of it cumulative. All of it preventable with one swap. Kale, spinach, arugula, romaine. Any dark leafy green delivers what iceberg cannot, and delivers it to a body that is working hard every day to extract exactly those compounds from every meal it is given. The bowl does not get smaller. The ritual does not change. But what fills it begins doing something that actually matters. Let me show you how all 6 of these foods connect, because this is not 6 separate facts. This is one biological story. Your leg health after 65 rests on 3 pillars. The first pillar is circulation, blood vessels that remain elastic, wide, and responsive. Beets address this directly through nitric oxide production. Kale addresses it through vitamin K1 and calcium regulation. Canned tomatoes, through BPA and excess sodium, erode it. Corn, through omega-6 driven inflammation, erodes it. The second pillar is nerve signal integrity. The peripheral nerves in your feet sending accurate, real-time balance data to your brain. Sweet potatoes protect this by stabilizing blood sugar and reducing oxidative stress on nerve-supplying capillaries. Corn and its glycemic load attack it. Iceberg lettuce, through magnesium displacement, quietly weakens the electrical environment that nerves operate in. The third pillar is neural response speed. The brain's ability to detect instability and issue corrective commands fast enough to prevent a fall. Kale's lutein directly feeds this system. Iceberg lettuce, through lutein displacement, starves it. Every meal either reinforces these three pillars or slowly erodes them. I want to take a moment away from the science, because what I find in almost every conversation I have with adults in their 70s and 80s who feel like something has shifted, the legs are heavier, the balance is less certain, the walks feel harder than they used to, almost none of them connect that experience to food. They connect it to age, to genetics, to something inevitable. And I understand why. Because nobody has ever sat down with them and explained the actual biology. The blood vessels, the nerve signals, the calcium, the inflammatory ratios. Nobody has shown them the mechanism. They have just been told to eat healthy, without ever being told what healthy specifically means for a body that is 70 years old. Your body at 70 is not a failing system. It is a system with a different set of needs than it had at 40. And when you understand those needs, when you can see the actual biological reason behind a food choice, everything changes. You are not following a diet. You are having a specific, informed conversation with your own biology. One meal at a time. Here is your body's blueprint in 6 points. Add beets for nitric oxide, vessel relaxation, and blood flow to the lower body. Add sweet potatoes for glycemic stability, nerve protection, and muscle function. Add kale for vitamin K1, arterial calcium regulation, and neural processing speed. Reduce corn eaten frequently. It disrupts your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio and accelerates vascular inflammation. Reduce canned tomatoes with BPA and salt. They add endocrine disruption and fluid pressure on peripheral nerves. Replace iceberg lettuce as a dietary staple. It displaces the exact micronutrients your aging vascular and nervous system depends on most. No expensive supplements. No complicated protocols. Just 6 decisions, made consistently, over time, that change the biological environment your legs are working inside of every single day. The human body is not a passive system. It is a responsive one. It is responding right now to everything you gave it at your last meal. And it will respond to everything you give it at your next one. Your independence is worth fighting for. Your balance is worth protecting. And the most powerful tool you have to do both is sitting in your kitchen. Use it wisely. Every meal is a choice. Make them count. I am Dr. Helson. If this gave you a clearer picture of what your body is actually doing,